Hello, hello. How's everyone doing? We're coming to the end of GDC. Okay, but cool. So we're going to spend some time talking about the new sprite rigging tools for 2D, as well as 2D lights. And we're going to split the presentation between us. So I'm Russ Scammell. I'm the product manager for 2D. And I'll be doing the bit at the end around lights. But I'm going to pass it over to Andy now. I'll let you introduce yourself, and he'll take you through the sprite rigging stuff. Cool.
Cool. Thank you. So my name's Andy. I'm Evangelist at Unity, and I'm based in the Unity Copenhagen office. And I'm basically going to present the new sprite rigging workflows that are available right now today. People can download them today. Ross is my fact checker, by the way. If I get anything wrong, he's just going to shout at me. So. He's a very nice guy. So sprite rigging is something that we've been working on for a little while. It's come through several different iterations, and it's getting to a point where the workflow is feeling very nice and very smooth. So much that I'm actually just going to rig a character live and hope it will go. Yeah, it will go fine. I practiced a number of times, but I'm going to rig a character from scratch and then show all the different steps and stages of doing that process. And with 2D sprite rigging, there was kind of like three main principles to solve. The first one is a unified skinning editor in the sprite editor window. Unity already has a sprite editor interface for setting up custom physics shapes and slices, so we should utilize that to have a lot of the sprite-based manipulation editing workflows in one place. We also needed support for multiple sprite single characters. Characters come in all different shapes and sizes and forms. Some are layered, some are like in like sausage limbs, like separated. Some come as like one piece. You have all sorts of different types of characters. So we wanted to support all of those different variations. Like you're not restricted to just a humanoid, but you can do like an octopus, you could do like a crab, you could do a tree. It doesn't really matter. And have this work very nicely with 2D PSD importing workflows. And the last piece of the puzzle is inverse kinematics. So we wanted to set up some kind of 2D IK system. So if you have different limbs that you wanted to move, you could, with the rigged sprite, be able to set up. So when you animate a wrist moving, the whole arm extends with it. Yeah. Or if you have an octopus, it moves all together like you'd expect IK to do. Do you have anything to add to that, Russ? Or?
No, that's good. You've got it, Andy. Let's get out of slides, get into Unity. What do you think?
So far, so good.
Yeah. Oh, not yet.
How do I?
No problem. Okay, you can just Alt-Tab. Let's get to your stuff.
Okay, so we're currently in Unity. But I don't want to be in Unity. I actually want to be in Photoshop to begin with. Yep. A lot of people don't draw their artwork and assets in Unity. At least I don't, and I think most people don't either. So we have here a Ninja Cat type character, and the Ninja Cat is built up of lots of different layers. So as you can see here in the Photoshop's layer window, we have like a layer for the right arm, the neck, the eye. Let's find something a little bit more obvious. These all split into different layers that are named and obviously stacked on top of each other. So for example, the cat's ears are obviously rendering on top of its head. The cat's front arm is obviously rendering in front of its body and things like this. This is how the artist has set up these layers. And we want to bring that into Unity. What we don't want to do is slice this up and import it and then kind of reconstruct it in a weird Frankenstein type format, especially if we're iterating on these characters. So we want to say to artists, hey, you can draw your cat or your whatever it is in different layers, and then that carries across into Unity. So we now have a new package, which is a PSD importer that allows you to, when you save your PSD file, is a PSB file. And what does PSB stand for?
Photoshop Big.
Photoshop Big.
Large document format.
You can then bring that into Unity, and you'll be able to have that metadata carry over with it. So recognize all these different layers. So now if I go to, spoiler alert, go over to Unity, I've got a standard cat PSD. But if I go to this PSB file, which has been imported, what you'll notice, okay, anyway, the screen's big enough. What you'll notice that there's a couple of different options. One is a character rig, one is mosaic, which I'll talk about later on. And you can even import things like layer grouping. And if I actually extend in the hierarchy this cat PSB file, you notice it's actually built up of all the different individual pieces that have been carried over. You don't have to go and rename them or reslice them up. It basically brings them all over already in this stack. So now that we have our cat, what we want to do is then actually set up the rig. We haven't actually done that yet. We've just drawn the pieces and put them in separate layers. So if I open up the sprite editor, which if you've used Unity and its 2D tools, you probably, or even UI tools, you've probably used this editor many times. And what you'll notice is it hasn't imported the cat into the sprite editor already built up. It's actually kind of exploded it, or in a mosaic format. So it means that we can still go to different parts of the character or whatever's been imported, and then rename them and tweak them and maybe do some extra polish in Unity. So when you have the rigging packages imported, which you might have a slide for, no?
No.
From Package Manager, you can import in 2D rigging and IK, or 2D animation package, I think it's called.
2D animation, yeah, that's what you want to look for in the package manager.
What would I ever do without you, Russ? So what you'll notice is that when that's imported, the sprite editor has this extra skinning editor option. So let's have a look and see what that does. So skinning editor will then take your kind of mosaic laying out imported PSD, or PSB even, and then kind of reconstruct it back into its shape. And all the layers have been included as well. So the cat's whiskers obviously render in front of his body, the back arm renders behind the back arm, and etc. And what we want in this skinning editor interface is to be able to very quickly set up rigs and be able to set up different rigged characters and bones, all very intuitively, all in the same interface. So this is split up into 3 different sections. One is bones, one is geometry, and one is weights. So let's start with the bones. So with bones enabled, we can then, I wasn't lying when I said I'm going to rig this character live, we can then set up a bunch of bone points that then are kind of overlaying on top of our character. And it's a very intuitive workflow. You just go click, 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 and build up your bones. You can even do something like make a free bone. So let's rig up here. Let's rig this ear as well, and let's rig the front of the face. Oh, let's do that. Let's also rig the arm. Russ, you can chime in if you want. It's a little boring to watch someone rig something, right?
No, that's good. So as you see, as Andy's working there, he's got bones that are parented to other bones, and this is a really common workflow that you want to make sure you support when you're building a system like this. And in cases where you've got the bones wrong, you can always go back in and edit the joints or split the joints up or add extra bones later.
So thank you. Thanks for the, so very quickly, I've got the character all set up. I am no professional rigger. If there's a rigger here, you can argue at me later on or throttle me later on. I'm no professional rigger, but it kind of goes to show that you don't have to be able to set up a rig and basically use the tools to set up something like this. So what I'm next going to do is go to geometry. And currently these bones aren't attached to any sort of part on the cat.
Yep.
And I'm going to skip a lot of steps because I'm kind of running out of time, I guess. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to generate the geometry based off of the sprites that the bones are then going to be mapped to. So once I hit generate all for visible, it goes through. It goes through all the layers, and it turns the cat into rainbow. And this isn't a shader or anything like this. What this instead is doing is if you've done any form of like 3D weight painting and things like this, is creating the geometry shape around each sprite, and it's also automatically baking in the weights. It's doing that all in the same step. So what you'll now notice is if I go to different parts of the cat, I can actually move and animate different parts of the cat, and you see that it's already baked in. Of course, there's a couple of imperfections that I need to fix, but it's done a pretty good job already automatically here. So we can actually modify the different parts, and you'll notice it's all working. And I can reset the pose back to normal. At the bottom right, you can see that there's some extra settings for different extra outline details and things. Like, for example, this blade might be a bit too complicated for what it needs to do, but for the purposes of this demo, it's okay. It's fine. Actually, the whiskers are pretty over the top, but that's okay. We don't need anything more precise. So yep, we can then modify this. We can obviously move these different parts and undo that as well. And now that we've got this all set up, one thing that you can then do is tidy it up. So I'm going to tidy up a couple of things and show some common issues with generating stuff like this. So what we have here are the ears are rigged. So if I move this ear, what you'll notice is in my animation, like Russ is the art director, he might say, I want the ears to wiggle like this on the cat.
But get the ear bone to not squish the head like that.
You're doing your Lucas Mayer moment.
Yeah.
So, however, we've got a bit of an issue with the automatically generated weights. So you notice as the ear moves, the whole back of the cat's head moves as well. We don't want that. What we want to do is we want to have the ears kind of move independently. So this is where we can actually use the weight brush to sort of paint some extra detail. And you can do this whilst the bone is kind of moved and deformed, and you can see that change. It's going to make sense in a second. So if I move this ear back, and I'm like, okay, the edge of the face is kind of a little bit like this, I can actually go to the weight brush, select the bone I want to paint the weight to, and select the head. And then you'll notice that as I paint the distribution of that bone, it's kind of reforming back into its original shape. So you're not really you're sort of erasing the influence from bone A, but re-adding the influence to bone B. So that looks pretty good. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, let's tidy this up a little bit more. Yep, that seems, yeah, that's pretty good so far. And let's save the face. Seems good to me. So we might say, all right, we don't want so much influence here, so now let's paint this like so. It's pretty fun. You can then basically go in and then kind of tidy up all these different parts. I'm not going to do that now because that might take a little while. But you can see that you can go in and kind of tidy up all the different sections of your character. Another type of workflow problem with automatic generation, it does 99% of the work, but we need to tidy up, is overlaying parts. And often characters such as this that are layered up have lots of pieces of geometry, especially if they have lots of cloth and things that overlap. And when it does the generation, it can't quite work out which bone goes to which piece of the geometry. So in this part, you'll notice that the blade is kind of acting kind of like an piece of elastic or something like this, and it's sticking to the leg. So what you'll notice is that the blade, if I pull it out here, it's kind of sticking onto the end of here. And this is kind of cool. I actually quite like this elasticy effect, but it's not exactly what we want. We want the blades to instead operate similar to this blade, where it's kind of independent, so we can animate the cat slicing and things like that. So what we can actually do is, instead of playing around with all these different layers, let's select the blade. And when you select the individual blade, you'll notice that it's not only having influence from this sort of highlighted bone, but also these bones here. And if you have more complicated characters, you can actually click this little sprite sheet button on the top. And when you pop it into here, you can actually select each of the different pieces and see the different bone influences. So you can pop in and out, especially if you have lots of layers. So you'll notice, so if I go back to the bone blade, let's move this out here. So we obviously don't want this blades to be kind of like elasticy like so. Let's go to bone influence. Selecting this piece, you'll notice that we have all the different bones that are influencing it. It's simple as removing those from that list. And now our blade is sorted, and we now have our cat all ready to slice things and attack things and stuff. Obviously, there's lots of other things I can go through in resetting this character up, but currently I've done some bone stuff, some geometry stuff, and some weight stuff. Anything you want to add there, or?
No, that's good. Let's take a look at it in the scene. I'd love to know what this looks like.
So it will look like a cat. Yeah, that's fine. So once that's all done and we've set up the rigs and the weights and stuff, click apply as we do for like basically everything in the sprite thing, in the sprite editor, and it will basically then kind of bake that data into the cat. Yep, it's already rigged. That's cool. Thank you, Unity. So now when I bring this cat into the scene, like so, what you'll notice is that all the rig points are already attached onto the cat in the scene. So if I bring it down here, well, you'll notice that these actually come in as you have all the individual sprite parts as well. So we can go here and apply sort of like shaders to individual parts of the body. So you could have the cat turns into like a ghost mode or something, or a stealth mode or camouflage and stuff. And what you can then do is you can then obviously, you then have all these points and then modify the cat and do all sorts of animation and stuff. These are just points. And the one thing that I want to then show you, yeah, Russ just clicked something, is this is a cat that's basically fully already set up. So this one is slightly more complex, and what you can notice that now you have these parts, you can then animate all the individual pieces. So this cat here has like a walk. I didn't animate this. I did the mocap, attached mocap points to a cap. And one thing you might notice here is that these yellow points are using the new IK rig as well. So after you have the rig bones in, you can set up IKs to animate the cat and things moving around. So here we have arm like this, knee like this. You can basically then set up your rig to have more extra IK data. So what I'm now going to do is that's kind of like a very quick 10-minute overview of the rigging and IK and PSD and tools like this. And I'm now going to pass it over to Russ to do the next part of the demonstration.
Very cool. Thank you, Andy. So that's the sprite rigging stuff, right? So that's animation. What I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time giving you a sneak preview of the 2D lighting system. So I'm going to throw a couple of slides up. Let's see now. Okay. So 2D lights. Okay. So why would you need these, right? What's the purpose of adding 2D lighting? So very often you're working with the same set of sprites. Maybe you've got an artist who's created a set of sprites and you want to add different kinds of mood and variation to these scenes, right? You want to reuse these assets in different ways by relighting them, or you want to create like different sections of the level where the lights have meaning, right? Maybe green means it's a swamp level or it's toxic, or red means danger, these kind of things. And generally when you're trying to work with special effects, it's always nice to have some lighting or some additive effects to work with. And we're going to take a look at how some of those come together. So what I'm going to cover is the different types of lights, which we'll look at in the demo. It's much more fun to see them in Unity. We're going to look at how we can use lights to target different layers. We're going to look at the blending options and how lights work together when you've got more of them. I want to show how they work with particles. And then finally, a little section on how to simulate surface detail using masks. Okay, so these are the demos that we're going to take a look at now. All right, let's jump into Unity. Okay, so here we have a scene. As you can see, the lights are working perfectly. No, just joking, no lights yet, completely unlit, right? So what do we want to do? We want to do something to this scene where we add a little bit more mood. Okay, so I'm going to turn on what we call the parametric light. Okay, so this is a parametric light where you have kind of parametric controls. You can turn the sides down. Let's turn them really way down so you can see what I'm working with here. You can play with feathering on the light so you can make it softer or hard-edged, right? We're going to dig into more details as we go. Let's keep looking through the lights. This is one of my favorites. It's the freeform light. It basically follows a shape. So here we can see our main character, the space bird, is being, looks like she's about to be abducted, right, by aliens. So what do? We can make the shape a little bit more interesting, or we can block this out a little bit more so that it doesn't look so bad, right? And you can use this to block out sections of your level where you want to show that something's going on. Cool. Next up, sprite lights. So if you've got a sprite that you want to use as a light cookie, you can just drag it onto this. And this works with any of the channels that you want to use inside your texture. And then the last type of light is the point light. So here we're going to see one of them. I'm going to turn off the, turn down the parametric light here. Turn this one down a bit, move it out of the way. So we can see how the point lights work. So point lights have this really interesting control so that you can set where the target is, and you can change the inner and outer ranges of the lights, as well as the inner and outer angle, right? And if you do a complete circle, you basically get a point light, right? A pure point light. These are now in kind of spotlight mode. So we're going to turn on a couple of those, and there we can see. And of course, all of this stuff just animates as you would expect. So I've run all of these things through the animator. You can see we're just changing colors, we're moving the point lights around, and we've immediately added some mood and variation to the scene. Okay, next up, let's turn off these guys, and let's turn on the these lights, right? So this looks pretty cool, right? I could just stop here and go, okay, I'm going to make a silhouette-based game, right? And it's all going to just look like this. Or maybe my artist really wants all of his art to be lit, and maybe I should be doing something with it, right? So I want to show you how I can select all of these freeform lights and then dig in here. I just want to show you what this is. Target sorting layers, okay? So what I've got here, I've got all of these objects on different sorting layers. I'm going to switch them over to level background. So that's pretty nice, right? Now the level background is lit, but I've still got this level foreground in shadow, which is kind of nice. I want this effect. However, I don't want the Spacebird character to be unlit. That's not cool. So I'm going to put a light on her as well. And then last but not least, we have some effects in here. We have a particle system with just dust motes flying up into the sky. And I want to make sure that that is lit as well. And the way we do that is we've got a lit shader on the particles, which you just need to turn on, right? So let's hit play on this and see how we're doing. And there you go. You can move our character around. You can see the effect of the lights. And you can, if you look really closely, you can even see our little particles being lit, and everything's just moving around. And this is it's a much more vibrant level than it would have been. I want to shout out at this time that this artwork that you see here is from the 2D Forest Pack by Mikael Gustafsson. So thank you very much. He's on the asset store. You've got to check out his work. It's awesome. Okay, so let's take a look at one more section. Multiple lights, right? So far I've been careful not to overlap any of these lights, but now I want to do exactly that to show you how they look. So we're going to turn on these lights one by one. So here we've got a red light, and here's green. Okay, and here's blue. So what we've done here is we're using alpha blending, right? Just simple blending. So what I want to change is I want to change how they blend. So that's an alpha blend, and this is additive. So this is what we did originally, and you can choose to do an alpha blend like this, and then change the light order so that you can have lights acting in certain orders. Or with the additive turned on, I quite like this effect, which is why I cross them over like this. And I can turn up the feathering and make this really kind of cool, soft rainbow sheen across the level, right? So very cool, very fun. All right, let's look at a slightly different type of light or a slightly different light operation. I want to look at how to simulate surface details, right? So we've got a couple of minutes. We're going to dig into that one. And then that will be the end of the demos. Okay, so let me take a look. Let me just dig through my scenes here. Surface details and masks. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to show you these characters, right? They're slightly different. They've been set up slightly differently. So the difference here is that the main character has a secondary texture. So if we look here, secondary textures. This is a new module that we're adding to the sprite editor window that allows you to define other textures that work together with that sprite. Now, there's something like associated textures. So here we've got a normal map on the character. We've also got an outline, right? And we're going to do something interesting with this stuff. Okay, so if we look at this scene carefully, we can see these are sprites. And if we look at the assembly, the way it's been put together, we can see here is the mother bird, right, the father bird, and the little bird, and they've all been set up with this same set of associated textures. Now we've got a point light in blue here that is doing all of the kind of fill work in the background. You can see that's kind of bringing up that light there. And then if we open up this assembly of things here, it's a point light that acts as the key. And finally, we have a rim light that is acting on the outline. So without further ado, let's just hit play on this and see how it all goes. And there we go. So now we have a light acting on the normal maps and the outline. And these are just sprites lit the way that you've come to think about lighting if you've worked in 3D, but this is all functioning in your 2D game using a sprite renderer. Cool. And that is as much as we have. So thank you very much. Oh, and we're done. So we may have a couple of minutes for questions. So if anyone has any questions, we can open it up to the floor, possibly, before we get kicked out. No?
If not, we'll be wandering around.
We'll be around. Come and find us, and we can tell you whatever you need to know. Is that cool?
Until security kicks us out. Yeah.
Until security kicks us out.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.